Versatile Mage. Chapter 446. Bristle with anger. The taste of fresh blood lingered on her lips. Lu Ru would feel dizzy whenever she saw blood in the past, yet blood had somehow become splendid, sticky, sweet, and she seemed to forget the pain, hatred, and sorrow accumulated in her heart at that moment. However, Lu Ru did not indulge in pleasure for too long. Her body shuddered violently as she came to a realization. She withdrew the fangs from Mo Fan's neck in panic and touched them with her hand in disbelief. God! What was I doing? Lu Ru could not believe it. She looked at Mo Fan, who was staring back at her. She could not detect any ripple of emotion from his eyes. Yet, the more emotionless they seemed, the more Lu Ru felt like she was being pierced with holes by his gaze, clueless about how to face him. Lu Ru struggled to her feet as she broke free from Mo Fan's hug. She took a few steps backward, as a great sorrow surged within her body. Normally, she would have broken out in tears by now, as she never thought she would be hurting the person who was helping her. However, not a single drop of tears was shed. It would be too fake if she simply dug her face into her hands and cried. A dizzy feeling gave her the urge to throw her body, which no longer felt like her own, deep into an abyss. What am I? What was I doing? Vampire, the species that she hated to the guts, she had turned into one of them, and even harmed her friend. Lu Ru did not dare to look at Mo Fan. She quickly ran into a nearby path among some woods shrouded in darkness. Maybe she was unaware that her speed kept increasing in the dark, that she had already run a few hundred meters in an instant. Mo Fan, frozen to the spot, tried to chase after her but was shocked by Lu Ru's speed as well. Not too long ago, she was only a delicate, ordinary girl, but she had completely changed after receiving the blood. The color of her pupils, the sharp fangs, the charming red lips on her pale face, her look had not changed, yet her figure was shrouded in a mysterious mist and a totally different, dark temperament. Looking at her back running into the distance and hearing her despairing cry, Mo Fan felt a surge of sorrow in his heart. She bore great hatred toward the vampires, to the extent that she had tried to fight one with a dagger, but now she had turned into one herself. Mo Fan could not possibly imagine the despair she was experiencing. Mo Fan, what's wrong? Ling appeared beside him. We were still too late, said Mo Fan, looking at Ling and shaking his head helplessly. Ling immediately realized what had happened after noticing the teeth marks on Mo Fan's neck and his pale face. What should we do now? The vampire seems to have noticed something. We've lost track of him, asked Ling. I'm quite tired too. Let's head back, said Mo Fan. Mo Fan felt lightheaded after Lu Ru had drunk a significant amount of his blood. It was not ideal to try and hunt the vampire down now. He would decide what to do once he recovered. In Mo Fan's opinion, the only thing he could possibly do was exterminate the vampire. As for the rest, he would worry about it later. After returning to the apartment, Mo Fan laid on the couch facing upward. He had consumed a blood serum and should recover fairly quickly after some rest. Mo Fan, why did you let Lu Ru go? Zhao Manting was pacing up and down the room worriedly. I couldn't catch up to her, said Mo Fan. Couldn't catch up? Zhao Manting was astounded. She was very fast. I'd already used my blood tabby when I was getting her out of the club, said Mo Fan. You always say that I will do something to her when I'm protecting her, but I'm not blind. It's obvious that she has feelings for you, but she's afraid to trouble you, said Zhao Manting. Don't let me get my hands on the vampire, or else I would skin him by peeling the layers off one by one. Mo Fan could not find a way to vent his frustration. He had almost recovered, so his only thought now was to find the vampire. Mo Fan, I've located the vampire. Ling brought some good news as Mo Fan's stomach burned with fury. Mo Fan rose from the couch, his eyes flickering with murderous intent. I'm not Mo Fan if I don't kill that jerk. Mo Fan did not want to waste any time, jumping down from the balcony instead of taking the lift. As he was falling to the bottom floor, His body quickly dissolved into the shadows at the side of the lake, and something swept across the surface like a nimble nighthawk. Zhao Manting had just reached the balcony when he saw the enraged Mo Fan landing on the other side of the artificial lake. An elegant wolf-shaped creature leapt out from a gap under the moonlight. In mid-run, Mo Fan quickly jumped onto the swift star wolf's back. The creature's star-colored fur drifted in the wind as he rode into the distance with the furious Mo Fan, disappearing among the busy interconnecting streets. "Fuck, wait for me," yelled Zhao Manting at Mo Fan's leaving figure. A magician whose primary element was light and secondary element was water would never dare to jump off a building like Mo Fan. He had no choice but to take the elevator. Damn, a magician that still needs to drive, what the heck? Grumbled Zhao Manting. He started the engine of his car, stepped on the pedal, and drove out of the parking lot. Unfortunately, the bar at the pay station dropped down in front of him. Zhao Manting instantly lost his temper. When he recalled Mo Fan's furious yet unrestrained expression, he clenched his teeth and stepped on the gas pedal. The bar was smashed into pieces, landed on the ground, and the black car surged ahead. He could not drift around in shadow form or ride a summoned beast across the city, but if he did not even have the courage to smash the pay station's bar to earn some time, he would quit being a magician straight away. He was also responsible for the series of events that had turned Lu Ru into a vampire. God knows how long it would take the Hunter Union to send someone over to handle the incident. Mo Fan was already making his way to the vampire, so he should be heading there too. Chapter End. Versatile Mage. Chapter 447. Whose blood did she drink? South of Zhuhui District, the white lights of a tall, luxurious office building shone upon the silent business district. There were many office buildings here, most around 20 floors tall. The one shining with white lights was the only building with 40 floors, more than 100 meters tall. The top floor of the building was temporarily empty, as no company had moved in yet. The whole floor only had some work tools prepared for renovation. It was late and quiet. The building was completely empty. Even the security guard was half asleep on the first floor, not noticing an eerie figure moving through the grayscale views captured by the surveillance cameras. The figure moved quickly, disappearing from one camera and appearing instantly in another. He seemed to be searching for something, like a misty gust. He went all the way to the 40th floor, the empty floor which only had an outer frame. The floor was not tall, only slightly more than 3 meters high. The place felt gloomy, as the city lights barely cast shadows across the floor. Black coat, sharp and icy face, fresh red lips. Nidong stood in front of the windows, staring at the night view of the modern yet tiny city. Normally, he would be at the North Country Club, enjoying his delicious prey, but that was no longer possible. He had been kicked out from the family and had become an abandoned vampire. The reason was simple. The Hunter Union had set their eyes on him. In other words, the family no longer cared if the Hunter Union hunted Nidong. They were weak and timid, still living with their tails between their legs even when their capabilities far surpassed humans and magicians. Nidong had enough of them and was somehow relieved to have left the family. At least no one would speak irritating rules beside his ears anymore. A strange wind blew through the empty floor, sweeping the back of Nidong's head. Nidong grinned and spoke without turning his head, "So you do have some sensibilities still. Why didn't you continue to wear your disguise in the institute? You didn't want to help me a few days ago. Why are you here now?" A woman stood behind Nidong. She had a slim figure, with disheveled yet elegant hair. The figure moved closer, taking one step at a time very lightly. "Die, asshole." The girl let out a shrill cry. Her hands turned into white, sinister claws, grabbing at Nidong's neck like 5 daggers. The claws left a cold aftertrail in the air and deep wounds on Nidong's neck. Nidong did not expect the girl to attack him. Luckily, he instinctively dodged when he sensed the attack. Otherwise, the claws would have sliced his neck off from head to shoulder. "Are you out of your mind? Why is it you?" Nidong held his neck and hid aside. Fresh blood poured out from the gaps between his fingers. In the past, there was no blood when Nidong's heart was stabbed by a dagger, but it began to pour out after his neck was cut open. It turned out that for vampires, blood was stored in body parts above the shoulders, especially the head and neck. Nidong initially thought she was the woman from his family, but when he saw a familiar yet strange face after turning around, he was left in astonishment and slight disbelief. Lu Ru, Nidong blurted out after staring at the infuriated girl for a moment. I'm going to kill you, repeated Lu Ru as if she had lost the ability to speak, trying to unleash all the anger in her heart. You've turned into one of the blood tribe. Impossible. This isn't possible. Without one from the blood tribe giving you their blood, you'd only turn into a monster. Nidong protested in astonishment. Pale face, red lips, and exposed sharp fangs. Her previous delicate, adorable look had turned completely savage, pained, and furious. Her glamorous appearance was beyond recognition, her face filled with all sorts of negative emotions. It was true that Nidong had been planning to turn Lu Ru into one of the blood tribe. He had a deep-seated lust for the girl and wanted to make her one of them so she could always be his companion. However, he had not completed the blood tribe's ritual. He had murdered the policewoman to collect enough fresh blood for Lu Ru's first meal. He had only released her blood, which had returned to her body after being modified by the blood diagram, the first step. She would have to inherit the blood of the blood tribe by drinking the blood of someone from the blood tribe to fully evolve into a vampire. Nidong had drunk the middle-aged man's blood after awakening from the ritual and became a vampire. The middle-aged man then became his senior, whom he could never betray. Nidong wanted to supply the blood that would make him her senior so she could never betray him. Unfortunately, he was kicked out of the family on the way back, and when he arrived at the North Country Club, someone had already rescued Lu Ru. Whose blood did she drink? Why did she become one of the blood tribe instead of a monster? Lu Ru launched her attack while Nidong was still confused. She was clearly unable to control her power adeptly yet, purely using brute force. Her might was so shocking that she tore a pillar of the building apart with a single swipe. In addition, her speed was incredible. Nidong had to rely on his shadow element to change his position rapidly to dodge her attacks, yet she still managed to catch up to him. The strength of a vampire depended on the rare blood they acquired and their senior. Vampires paid great attention to lineage. The stronger the senior, the stronger their juniors. However, this Lu Ru had only turned into a vampire a day ago, yet her strength and speed had already surpassed everyone in Nidong's generation. How was this possible? Lu Ru caught Nidong's coat and slammed him into the hard windows, which began to crack. Shit! Nidong climbed to his feet with a furious expression. He could not accept that the girl who was supposed to be his servant now had a stronger lineage. Most importantly, he had totally lost control over Lu Ru. Whose blood did she drink? Why was her aura slightly different from that of the blood tribe? Chapter End. Versatile Mage. Chapter 448. Try touching her again. Humph, you have no idea how to use your power. Do you really think you can kill me? Roared Nidong furiously. Mists of red blood spread rapidly in the air, floating eerily in front of Nidong. The blood surprisingly transformed into a long scythe under his control. The bloody scythe sprang forward and slashed at Lu Ru, shattering the steel beams along the way. Nidong grinned cruelly. Since he could not have her, he would destroy her instead. The giant blood scythe arrived before Lu Ru. The girl had no clue how to use her speed to dodge it. The scythe struck her waist and knocked her flying. Lu Ru smashed through a few walls left from the renovation. The pieces scattered across the floor. Even her body is so tough. Nidong almost clenched his fangs to pieces. His blood scythe could have killed a warrior-level creature if they were not defending. However, it had only knocked her flying instead of slicing her waist. This clearly showed how outstanding her defense was. Nidong began to doubt if Lu Ru was actually one of the blood tribe. Lu Ru, her face as pale as paper, rose to her feet among the debris. Her inhuman eyes were fixed on Nidong. The vampire had killed her sister, her only family member, and had turned her into a vampire as well. When she recalled Mo Fan's astonished yet indifferent gaze, her own embarrassed face with a trace of blood on her lips, and the blood slowly leaking from eyes that could no longer shed tears, it drove her even crazier. She hated the vampire for taking away the person dearest to her. She was on the verge of losing her mind from anger, filled with the sole thought of killing the vampire. She was furious that she could no longer face the man she had recently fallen in love with, the man who had brought a glimpse of hope to her dull life. The despair had far exceeded the limit she could endure, as if she had been thrown to the bottom of a valley. The only reason she had not ended her miserable life yet was because she wanted to kill the vampire who had destroyed everything. Lu Ru ignored the wound on her waist. She could not feel the pain due to the overwhelming sorrow she was experiencing. In the past, she did not even have the courage to harm little animals. Now, she was determined to tear the vampire before her into pieces. She continued to charge at Nidong. On the gloomy floor, a black shadow wove past the obstacles and appeared in front of him. Her face looked more savage with blood leaking from her eyes as she reached out with her sharp claws once again. A chilly gust followed the swipe of the white claws. She was venting her hatred through brute force. The swipes swept past the vampire's body wildly. Nidong was very agile and always managed to dodge Lu Ru's frantic attacks. Suddenly, Nidong stopped and pointed his finger at Lu Ru. Countless pairs of wings flapped wildly in the dark. Screeches were heard as a huge number of bats with sharp wings appeared from all directions. They were following Nidong's orders, flying at Lu Ru en masse. Each of them left shallow cuts on Lu Ru's body as they flew past. More bats began to appear, almost wrapping around Lu Ru, preventing her from moving forward. "You're no match for me, same as in the past," Nidong sneered with a cold grin. A lump of blackness appeared on Nidong's palm, emitting an icy, extraordinary glow. He pushed the black substance forward. Its overwhelming energy blasted into Lu Ru, who was still surrounded by the bats. Lu Ru was knocked far away by the impact. Her body drew an arc in the air before slamming hard into the ground near the end of the floor. Her body continued to roll and only stopped after slamming into the steel glass at the end. She lay on the ground for a long time. "Humph, stupid woman, what a waste of my effort." Nidong slowly approached Lu Ru's body, his eyes full of disgust and disdain. He was still holding his bleeding neck. Blood was extremely precious to the blood tribe. Lu Ru had inflicted serious damage on him. Nidong arrived beside Lu Ru and lifted her with a single hand. Lu Ru glared at the vampire. Inside her eyes, he was almost burned into ashes by her fury. Ungrateful wretch. Nidong was infuriated too. He violently slammed Lu Ru into the nearby wall. The wall, made of steel glass, almost cracked when her body hit it. Nidong seemed to be torturing Lu Ru on purpose, lifting her again and slamming her into a different section of the wall. An ordinary human would have broken into pieces by now. Lu Ru, however, only fractured a few bones after her transformation, without endangering her life. The stronger Lu Ru's body was, the angrier Nidong became. How was his lineage inferior to hers? The steel glass shattered with a loud crash. Sharp pieces scattered everywhere. Lu Ru almost fell out of the window, hitting the ground beside the edge, the wind howling inches away. She clenched her teeth and tried to rise. Fiery fist. A blazing, rose-colored flame appeared at the entrance of the floor. Its light instantly lit up the gloomy floor, revealing Nidong's grinning face. The flames withdrew into a bracelet on Mo Fan's right wrist, on the verge of jetting out. "Try touching her again." The burning fist swept through the darkness. A giant fiery punch traveled across the floor, almost filling the entire area. The fiery fist struck Nidong, who could not defend in time. His body was slammed hard into the steel glass by the tremendous impact. The steel glass broke into pieces, allowing the flames to burst out from the floor like a fiery tongue, lighting up the sky a blazing red. The vampire was thrown out of the building by Mo Fan's punch. His body was engulfed in flames and dropped the full 40 floors before slamming into a self-created pit on the street. Chapter End. Versatile Mage. Chapter 449. Battle against the vampire in rage. Lu Ru raised her head and saw Mo Fan approaching her through the vanishing light from the flame. She realized something and quickly covered her face with her hand. She was afraid that Mo Fan would see her fangs. She had no clue how to hide these loathsome things. She felt like a monster when they were exposed outside of her mouth, and she had also used them to drink Mo Fan's blood. Damn it, damn it, damn it, you're asking for your death. The vampire's furious roar was heard coming from outside the window. Despite falling from the height, he was not smashed into minced meat. Instead, he had turned into a bat and flown back up to the floor. The bat's wings were terrifying, like giant leather stained with oil wrapped around the wing bones, like a great long wall when they were fully extended. Nidong angrily flew back to the floor and locked his vicious, glowing eyes on Mo Fan. This goddamned magician was the reason everything went wrong, including him being kicked out from the family and losing his favorite prey. Those who dared mess with vampires all ended up with their corpses and souls missing. Since Nidong was no longer bound to the rules, he would not care if the person was a magician or not. Claw of Destruction. A sticky lump of blood appeared around Nidong, rapidly taking the shape of a giant claw. As Nidong swiped his hand forward, the claw made of blood tore at Mo Fan. The claw swept past the floor, big enough to hold Mo Fan's entire figure in it. Mo Fan did not dare to lower his guard. His body quickly dissolved into the shadows spread by the scattering light. The claw clenched tightly, trying to pinch Mo Fan into pieces. Unfortunately, it had only caught Mo Fan's afterimage, as the real Mo Fan had turned into a lump of shadow moving toward another position across the wall. Just a little trick, mocked Nidong. He was too familiar with the shadow element. Thus, a simple relocation through the shadow was not enough to escape from his darkness-contaminated eyes. As Nidong swiped his hands, screeches were heard coming from the darkness on the floor. Cold flickers took place as the sharp wings flapped rapidly, their eyes emitting red glows. It was the Nightblade bats. Nidong was able to control hundreds of these Nightblade bats at a time. Their attack could easily shred a living human into pieces. The Nightblade bats came from all directions and quickly gathered toward Mo Fan. Mo Fan was aware that the space in the building was limited, which hindered him from using his full strength. He quickly grabbed the severely injured Lu Ru and dashed toward the gap between the steel glass. The steel glass broke from the collision, and the pieces dropped from the 40th floor together with Mo Fan. Do you think you can run away from me? Nidong's bellow came from behind them. The roar was followed by the screeches of the Nightblade bats. The bats rushed out of the building like a cloud of black gas, chasing after the falling Mo Fan relentlessly. Their descent was not quick enough. Many parts of Mo Fan's body were covered in cuts from the Nightblade bat's wings. Lu Ru immediately used her body to protect Mo Fan from the bat's attack. Even though she was covered in wounds, the Nightblade bats could only leave shallow cuts on her body without focusing on a certain part. Her body composition was extraordinary compared to normal humans, even stronger than magicians. The flock of black creatures followed after Mo Fan, who cast the fleeing shadow as he almost landed on the ground. His figure quickly dissolved among the shadows of the buildings and moved toward the illuminated street. The street was deserted. The street was full of finance companies, and most of their operating hours were only from 9 to 5. It was rare to see any pedestrian here once the clock struck 7. The nearest residential area was around half a kilometer away. The number of cars passing by on the street was almost zero, and the traffic lights on the intersections were mere decorations. Mo Fan sprinted to the intersection using fleeing shadow and was unable to travel any further when the shadows diminished at the center there. Meanwhile, the Nightblade bats were nocturnal creatures. They could easily trace Mo Fan's location and stayed on his heels. Their inky black bodies were fully exposed under the gloomy streetlights, all packed densely together. Still chasing after me. I'll kill you all. Mo Fan stopped running. A fiery star pattern was drawn rapidly under his feet, while flames accumulated on his right fist rapidly. As the star pattern was completed, a blazing force gathered on Mo Fan's wrist. Groundbreak. As the fist struck the ground, the cement at the center of the intersection began to crack open. Boiling lava jetted out into the air, dyeing the place red. A fiery, wild, and tempestuous groundbreak blossomed, centered on Mo Fan. Mo Fan had thrown the punch right at the ground under him, and the fire bursting out from it covered him whole, as if his entire person was set aflame. The Nightblade bats were charging at Mo Fan in a stream, planning to tear him to pieces. However, they were quickly burned into ashes by the flames, despite their numbers. A huge chunk of them was burned to death and wiped out instantly. The fire was still drifting wildly. Mo Fan's body was blazing red from the fire, looking like a volcano that would explode in any second. The remaining Nightblade bats scattered like absent-minded flies, totally losing any courage to provoke Mo Fan. Mo Fan spat and raised his eyes, quickly discovering a pair of giant leather wings looming over him. Between the black wings was a savage face. The sharp fangs poking out from his upper jaw had almost reached the bottom of his jaw. Nidong opened his mouth and bit at Mo Fan's neck. He was not trying to drink Mo Fan's blood. He wanted to tear his throat out. Light protection. Sacred shield. As Mo Fan was still thinking about how he was going to dodge the attack, Zhao Manyan's chant was heard from not far away, where he had just arrived in his car. The sacred light shield quickly surrounded Mo Fan, forming a barrier that blocked the darkness and the evil creature. The fangs crashed onto the sacred shield. White smoke quickly rose from Nidong's fangs, and he immediately withdrew in fear. After all, the light element was a vampire's weakness, clearly shown by Nidong's panicked expression. Chapter End. Versatile Mage. Chapter 450 Perfect Defense. I told you to wait for me. See, you almost got yourself killed by coming here alone. Zhao Manyan had managed to make it in time. Mo Fan now had the protection of a sacred shield. Defended by the powerful light element spell, he was no longer afraid of the vampire's attack. He quickly drew a lightning element star pattern. Since he could not blast the asshole to death with his fiery fist, it would not hurt to strike the vampire to death with lightning. After all, the lightning element was somewhat related to the light element. Chanjin, Thunderbolt, Yaksha. Mo Fan completed the star pattern and pointed his finger at Nidong's head. A terrifying lightning bolt struck down between the buildings. A brilliant lightning dragon was reflected on the steel glass. The thunderbolt split into several forks halfway, which looked like a claw. Nidong had a fairly quick reaction, but the lightning had a wide area of effect. As it landed on the vampire, his body began to tremble, tiny sparks flickering on it. Nidong felt like his bones had loosened after he was hit by the lightning. If it weren't for the outstanding strength of a vampire, the force of the lightning would have been powerful enough to disintegrate him. Mo Fan, keep using lightning, said Zhao Manyan, not far away. In the meantime, a blue star pattern appeared under Zhao Manyan's feet. The water in the air rapidly gathered in his direction while he was drawing the star pattern. Rolling wave, raging tide. Blue water descended from the sky like a river. The fierce current resulted in a tide that almost occupied the entire street. The rolling wave swept forward and rapidly drowned Nidong, who was still recovering from the damage inflicted by the lightning. The violent tide dragged him more than 100 meters away. The impact of the wave had a weakening effect. Nidong was soaked in the water for a long time as his body was dragged about by the current. It took him some time to overcome the force of the water element spell, but to his surprise, another purple-black thunderbolt landed on his head. He was drenched in the water, which helped to conduct the electricity. The vampire had trouble rising to his feet for a prolonged period. His eyes were bloodshot, glaring at Mo Fan and Zhao Mannion. "How dare you two weak magicians oppose me?" Nidong finally gathered himself and snapped at the two magicians furiously. Nidong spread his arms and slowly lifted his hands. His claws extended to half a meter long, before they swiped forward in the shape of a cross with great power. A shockwave with a cross shape swept forward, slashing the streetlight poles on both sides of the road in half. The poles fell, and produced sparkles as the bulbs hit the ground. "Look after yourself, how could his claws grow so long?" swore Zhao Mannion. Mo Fan could not find any shadows nearby. In addition to that, the claws were approaching him swiftly, so he would not be able to dodge it with fleeing shadow in time. Mo Fan activated the departing nether shield without hesitation. A loud screech was heard as the claws collided with the departing nether shield. Hiding behind the shield, Mo Fan was still knocked more than 10 meters back. As the force completely dissipated, Mo Fan rose his head and saw a deep claw mark covering 10 meters of the street in front of him. On the other hand, Zhao Mannion had used the light protection, sacred shield to defend himself. However, as he was about to cast the next spell, Nidong appeared behind him from nowhere in an eerie manner. Only then did Zhao Mannion realize his position was covered in shadows. The vampire had used the shadow element to teleport himself for the surprise attack. His half-meter-long claws thrust at Zhao Mannion's chest mercilessly, as if they were going to tear Zhao Mannion's organs out instantly. Water barrier. Zhao Mannion was actually a magician without any offensive abilities, so all his defensive spells always helped him to survive longer in danger. The water barrier easily nullified the vampire's brute force. The stab from the claws was rendered ineffective. Zhao Mannion made use of the opportunity and one-handedly cast the light element basic spell. Brilliant light. Blind. The burning white glow on his palm exploded in front of the vampire. At such a close distance, most demon beasts would experience great pain from their eyes because of the spell, not to mention a vampire who was naturally afraid of light. Nidong felt like the glow was burning his eyes. Nidong covered his eyes with his hands and cried out in pain. His fangs extended once again, as he was trying to bite Zhao Mannion in a berserk manner. He could not see Zhao Mannion, yet he could sense his location. His water barrier was gone. The bite would easily take half of Zhao Mannion's life. Zhao Mannion did not panic when he saw the vampire was desperately trying to bite him. A golden shield with a pattern of guardian wings appeared in front of Zhao Mannion. The shield was made of some unknown material, its sturdiness comparable to steel. The vampire's fangs only left shallow teeth marks on it, inflicting great pain in return. "I'm going to kill you." Nidong was infuriated after being tricked several times in a row. He used his brute force to lift Zhao Mannion and the shield up, as if he were going to tear Zhao Mannion into pieces. To his surprise, Zhao Mannion was fully covered in defensive equipment. As a safety measure, Zhao Mannion had activated his shining golden armor after using the golden shield. The magic armor was obviously of superior quality, majestic in appearance, making him look like a golden warrior. Nidong had no chance of tearing Zhao Mannion apart when the guy was in the armor, regardless of how strong he was. By the time he remembered that he could slash through the golden armor with the power of his blood, Zhao Mannion had already completed a light element intermediate spell. The light protection, sacred shield rapidly wrapped around Zhao Mannion's figure. The scythe which the vampire had summoned with his blood immediately dissolved into a pool of blood when it made contact with the sacred shield. 1, 2, 3, 4 layers of defense, and by the time the fourth layer of defense crumbled, he had finished casting the defensive spell. Nidong felt like he was about to go crazy. He had encountered many intermediate magicians, yet he had never seen anyone with as many defensive abilities as Zhao Mannion. If Zhao Mannion were any other offensive-focused magician, he would have died many times, yet the vampire still had not touched a single strand of his hair. It was like the encounter between a fierce tiger and a sturdy turtle. The tiger had no clue what to do next. Nidong was extremely furious yet scared of the burn from the sacred shield. He immediately tossed Zhao Mannion into the distance. A magician like him should be thrown as far away as possible. Chapter end. Please guys like, comment, share, and subscribe.